Hello, welcome to this chapter. Here we're gonna take a brief look to the following variations after d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5, e6, knight c3, take, d6, e4, g6, and here we'll take a look at f3, bishop g5, knight g2, all these kind of setups. Why do we pack them in the same thing, in the same, let's say, group? Because there are some kind of general rules that apply to all of them, so it felt logical to pack them together. And the first thing is that we might experience some troubles with the bishop on c8, because white usually wants to play with f3 and basically complete the 4 in a row and secure the center. And this implies that our bishop doesn't have any way out to this diagonal. So usually this will imply that we'll try to look for a6, b5, and knight d7, rook b8, and b5 to create space for the bishop, or even sacrifice the pawn, or some initiative. So, many questions you might have here. If white achieves f3 and we are in trouble with the bishop, what is the price of white playing this way? Because otherwise it would be excellent, yeah? So the price is that after f3, we'll start with f3, white has a really nice structure, but white kind of struggles to develop the king side fluently, let's say. Because the knight and the bishop want to exit through the same square, so through e2. And this implies that white would need to be careful with the move order. White also wants to, let's say, if white puts the bishop on d3, we might have some knight d7, knight d5 taking the bishop, or pressuring to exchange a couple pieces. As usual, it doesn't change that much. In this variation, if we exchange a couple pieces, we have plenty of space of our two pieces of the bishop. Basically, we have more or less the same problem, if you think about it. We have two pieces that want to exit through the same square, as white has here. And if we solve it, we are kind of fine. And if white solves it and castles quickly, white is a bit better, I would say. So that's the main concern. So white has some options. If white wants to go for knight g2, knight g3 first, and then develop the bishop, we might have a chance to play h5 and to annoy the knight here. And if white wants to wait, we will need to wait as well to play knight d7, because here it's quite apparent, knight d7 is not a move. White has the extra option of knight h3. So this is a very important concept for you to remember, more than the move orders and stuff. Like, basically, you don't play knight d7 quick, because white can play knight h3, knight f2 for free, and then develop the bishop on e2, and then we are not able to exchange anything. This knight will not threaten the bishop, we won't get the tempo, and then it will be hard to create a breakthrough here. So usually that's the general rules of the position. And after bishop g7, we'll start with bishop g5. Because this is a normal development, and we have some strategical themes here that will be very important, and this variation shows them very well. So bishop g5 is not about the pin being something dangerous, because we have like 1, 2, 3 pieces being able to defend the pin, and also white doesn't have any way to create more pressure to the knight on f6. But it is more about weakening our king side. So we play h6. Usually, we don't want to allow white to, let's say, secure after we castle. It's a very common theme, yeah? Like white can prevent h6 once and for all. Here in this case, queen c1 would be better. And you might be wondering, what? Why? Why not queen d2? It will be very much apparent very soon, so you'll see. So here we start with h6, bishop e3, and now doesn't matter that much, but here including a6, a4 is fine. In general, in this variation, I will tell it, but yeah, in general, this variation, including a6, a4, is good in every variation, I would say. It doesn't matter that much. But here, at some point, white has some extra bishop b5 or knight b5 to develop quickly, so yeah, I don't know, that would be the reason, but in general, it doesn't matter if you play a6, a4 first. Castle, queen d2, and rook e8. And here we have one of the tricks, and why, for instance, the queen on d2 was a bit worse in that sense than on c1. So here, rook e8, we basically neglect the defense of the h6 pawn, and why it happens here. Because if white takes on h6, we have this knight e4, which is a very important trend. And, well, trend or tactic. And after knight e4, queen h4 check. And we will be able to take on h6. So here after g3, we take, and very importantly as well, there is a pin here. Yeah. So the white doesn't have the chance to play knight f6. So basically we thin out the center, we exchange a couple pieces, we have bishop pair, we have a lot of control of dark squares. The position is great, yeah, the balance is great. But be careful with this tactic, because let's say if white had already the bishop on e2 for any chance, now knight f6 would be winning, yeah? So again, it's a good tactic to know, but please make sure to review if it's exactly the same case, because sometimes don't do it like without thinking, yeah? And it's a good habit as well. So basically, white has many moves here. For instance, I don't know, like let's start with knight g2. That feels more logical, like white wants to develop the knight again. And now we can play knight bd7 because there is no knight h3 anymore. Again, we have the same trick here, because it will be an exercise here of logic. But the thing is, if white takes on h6, and we play the same knight e4, check, g3, g3 forces us to take with the queen on h6. Now, white won't have this knight pinned, but knight f6 is not possible because we have this knight on d7. So basically, we will take, and now the pawn on d6 is falling, but after rook e5 and knight b6, white is so far back in development, and we have really nice counterplay. And also, it's a very important thing to notice that we exchange the h pawn for a central pawn. So that usually implies that we have more value in the center, and white doesn't really have a chance to counter it, and it's not that clear that this pawn is useful at all. Yeah, so I would say black has even better prospects here. So let's say white just does normal development with knight g3, and now we play h5. Now, we play h5 for a couple of reasons. First is that this pawn is under threat now. Yeah, so be careful with the tactics because they change constantly. That's a good habit I want you to have playing the Benoni. Don't assume tactics. Yeah, get used to check all the time, because this is a great habit, and it will make you improve in chess in general. Yeah, to check for opportunities. So here we play h5, and also it's very important for you to notice that this position transposes if white played straightforward bishop e3 instead of playing bishop g5, h6, bishop e3. Basically, it's the same outcome if you think about it, and we would be playing h5 in one go. So here we have a couple important takes. First, we threaten h4. White doesn't really want to play h4 because it weakens a lot the king side. Also, this pawn is in trouble all the time, so whether, let's say, white will have a hard time just defending the pawn, we can even go for knight h7, I guess, and bishop f6, and white is like, okay, I need to take out the knight again, because otherwise the pawn is falling, for instance. And white could also play bishop g5, but here we have another important tactic that you need to know in this kind of setups, which is h4. We play h4 no matter what, and the idea is that after bishop h4, we have the same trick again, knight e4, it's the same more or less idea, yeah? And in this case, we threaten the queen, and we threaten the bishop. So after bishop d8, we can make check and take this knight, this bishop, and again, we exchange a side pawn for a central pawn, we have amazing bishop, we exchange a couple pieces, life is great, yeah? So we'll be even much better, I would say here. So these kind of tricks are very important for you to know, yeah? And basically you will see in the model games, I play this position with black, and we will get deeper there into how black can create counterplay, because here my opponent played bishop e2, and after h4, the thing is here we have many hits with, I don't know, knight h5, knight e5, we play h3, we sacrifice the pawn with b5. So basically I will go deep into them in the model game against Dubuisset, and yeah, and you will get a much better understanding of these setups, yeah? So white can also be fancy, and here you have all the move orders on the course, And here, for instance, knight c1 is another way to develop the knight, and basically claiming that, okay, we have the knight here on the side, and now we'll try to, again, develop everything, and then we fix the knight with white, yeah? So here we go for knight e5. Here, knight e4 works tactically, sacrificing the knight, but okay, I don't want you to remember this insanity, yeah? And okay, if you want to, you can spend tempo. Remember knight e4 in this precise position at this sideline, 30 moves already in. But okay, knight e5 looks to me very much logical, because here, okay, if we play h5, okay, we are not getting anything for h4, and white still doesn't threaten h6. So here, knight e5 is the next logical step. And here again, we don't have contemplate the king side, but we want to play b5 again. So here, bishop d7 and playing b5. Actually, this is kind of a novelty, but it makes a lot of sense since white spent a lot of time with the knight on c1, and the knight on c1 will be some kind of troublesome to defend the queen side, yeah? So after, again, we need to check bishop h6 all the time, and here after knight e4, here we have some fireworks, because here you might need to be suspicious, because if we play queen h4 check, as usual, we would lose the exchange, yeah, after knight f6. So here we have this beautiful knight f3 check first, and after bishop f3, rook e4 check, bishop e4, queen h4 check. Here there is a very common pattern, I'd say, in chess, that we play queen h4 check, and white is not allowed to play g3 because we take here. Let's say, let me have an example here. Here in the first move, let's say, for instance, it's very much known in the King's Gambit. Let's say we play some random move like knight c6, or I remember recently I was told that this was played in a move. But the idea is that white is not really threatening to take on e5, because after queen h4 check, white is not allowed to play g3 as we take the rook with after queen e4 check. So this theme is kind of known in chess, and basically it doesn't. You should know this pattern of chess. So basically, is well, you have a good example here, and okay, we go back here, and after knight g2, we go for knight c1, we go for knight e5. So here, bishop d7, we want to play b5 at some point. Here we could also go for g5, which is okay. If you don't want to remember this stuff, you want to remember that we want to play b5. But here g5 has a problem that maybe white is happy to play h4 with the rook still on h1. That's why we want to play bishop d7 first. And let's say if white castles, now we play g5. And now we defend the pawn since knight e4 is not a resource anymore. And here, yeah, like we will try to play b5, and also the knights can shift to g6 and h5 to get the f4 square, or to prevent white from playing f4. That's the two main concerns. And basically, with knight g6 already, let's say g3, which is not a great move here. Here we might even have some themes with g4 and giving up and losing up the center. Now white is helpless to defend e4, and white has so many holes in the like squares. But also it will be a great example to play knight g6, as white is never able to play f4, as it's very difficult to defend e4, and also bishop d3, we always have the way, the ability to go back. And also even here, f4 is difficult as we will always have knight g4, and this bishop doesn't have a free square, so we'll get this dark square bishop, so basically we will be very happy. So you see how hard it is for white to push up, and also this knight on c1 doesn't help at all, so this will be a good example. So we go back to the critical line after bishop h6, knight e4, knight f3. And here, if white would take with the pawn, he would be very happy to just check, take here, and we have an excellent compensation, let's say. Let's say king d1, we take here, and yeah, white is left without coordination at all. We will be playing f5, let's say queen c2. I'm pretty sure here even f5 should be great, like white takes here, and maybe rook e5, I don't know. because we want to bring the other rook, we want to take with check. We have queen d4, we have amazing bishops. We also have bishop a4 if white doesn't is not wary at all. So yeah, like white doesn't have any kind of coordination here. And after bishop f3, again we would have the same problem if we play queen h4. Like maybe, or not maybe. Maybe here g3 we could take, but we don't want to exchange the queens now. Maybe because white would be, I don't know, let's say this position. Okay, we kind of prevented knight f6 check, but after castle, we are piece down. I mean, we have some light compensation, but yeah, I'd say it's not enough to equalize. But after rook e4, queen h4, here again, we go back to the topic. White cannot play g3, and after king d1, bishop h6, we are a rook down, but this is very concrete, and white I felt this was a good example of how the Benoni praises dynamics, and it works very well if you try to keep going and to create threats. And sometimes you can give material for initiative, and it's a great tool in this opening of this defense for you to understand the importance of material and activity. Yeah. And here, for instance, we are already threatening the bishop on e4. We are threatening rook e1, and white doesn't really have much freedom of movement, and this bishop is completely cutting off this king. So let's say queen e1, it's a move to exchange the queens, and after queen g5, we just want to play rook e1, and white won't be able to do anything with the pin, so white kind of needs to move the queen away, because otherwise rook e8 and f5, it would mean that we already only exchange down, and with these two bishops and the complete discoordination for white, it will be amazing. So after queen f2, rook e8, bishop f3, and here I think queen f4 basically wins the game almost, because now we will take on b5 and on a4, and white is kind of helpless to defend on a4, and let's say rook e1 would be somewhat of a move that would be logical. Here we can already take on a4, and after b3 we could take on e8 and take on e1, and after queen e1, queen d4 check, we would gain back to rook, and then we have pressure here. And some of the endgames, for instance, even king c2 here, I mean, we have like, what, 3 pawns, white has a terrible bishop, and we have an amazing bishop here. I mean, I'm pretty sure white should lose him by force here. But this kind of unbalanced positions is something you should strive for in the Benoni. And, okay, this is a very concrete example with this knight c1. I mean, that's why I explained to you this g5, this way of playing, this understanding, like g5, h4, it's even interesting. I would say it's not losing at all for black. But I want you to show some examples of these dynamics. Basically, this knight c1 is not common at all. All these setups, all this move order, you won't be facing it likely. So don't take it as memorizing, but understanding the plans and the counters, and what white wants to achieve and what we want to achieve. Yeah. And for instance, another way to play here would be to give up a pawn, to play b5, and then defend h6. It will be also practical, but so yeah, you have many ways to approach it. White can also play knight d1, which is another way to approach it. And we will see a model game from Kasparov after knight e5, knight c3, and here g5 was to prevent bishop g6, and want to play knight h5. Bishop g6 was a threat already now, as now, let's say, if we don't play g5 here, now knight e4, imagine bishop h6, knight e4, knight e4. At the end of the line, this knight is blocking the rook, so this knight on e4 is not pinned, so knight f6 check will be possible. Yeah? Take your time, but I want you to have some imagination. It's also part of the course, like, okay, I'll not show every move here, so it's good for you to try to force yourself to calculate blindly. Yeah? And yeah, basically we cover these lines, and to make some kind of review is we wait to play knight d7 until white has defined the knight on e2. And yeah, and we have this theme with knight e4 that we need to be a bit careful. Yeah, I want you to think, yeah? Not to remember, think. So here white has some funny moves. One is bishop e2, and here what's the move we need to play? Have you been listening? Which move would need to play? So the move here is h5. Basically, if we were to play knight d7, white will be allowed to play knight h3, and also now white is trending to take on h6. So we need to be careful, because now white is trending this knight f6 check. So basically h5 is kind of the move. And now white is kind of like, okay, what is my knight doing on g1? So here we have a couple ideas. Bishop d1 is another way to play it, but this bishop needs to be in this diagonal to prevent b5 and also to cover the c4 square. And after knight b7, knight g2, rook b8, I feel like we keep up with b5, and the bishop on d1 doesn't make any sense. And we will make some space here. And also we can take with the knight, let's say after a5, we can just take with the knight, we threaten here, now a5, bishop a6 would be great. We will find a solution of this bishop for this bishop, and white is kind of struggling to create some space for the pieces, yeah? And also knight h3 is a possibility. The engine recommends this move, but obviously it's not very human. But after taking here queen c8, I feel here the move for white is to castle. And if we were to take on h3, king h1, rook g1, it feels like white has some kind of initiative, and white doesn't mind that much to have this free pawn here. And basically, after knight bd7, I prefer it. We would just want to play rook b8, c4, b5, and again, same plans, same old plans. I mean, white is very unlikely to play this way without being forced to. So yeah, just a side note. Here there was a fun move from Ding Liren with bishop c4. That was very creative because after bishop c4 has a very deep idea. After knight bd7, this was played against Magnus Carlsen, yeah? So Magnus Carlsen was black. And Magnus said, okay, we can play knight bd7, as now after knight h3, we can play knight d5. But here Ding Liren was very smart, and we played bishop e2. And it's like, what is Ding doing? Yeah, exactly. The thing is, now black doesn't have a move. White wants to play knight h3, knight f2, and if black tries to play knight e5, we can just take on h6, because again we have this check on f6. So losing a tempo is a very big brain idea for Ding Liren. So here again, white is setting up a trap, but here after h5, basically we have again the same solution. Knight g2, knight bd7, and now again we have some pressure on the bishop on c4. So again we have a bit more room for let's say exchanging a couple pieces. But here after b3 makes sense, this position we don't want to exchange, because after taking on c4, b5 is impossible, and white has everything, all the pawns on the light squares, and with the bishop on dark squares, which is usually great. So here b3, rook b8, and playing bishop d7 and b5, I would say is much. It's enough, I'd say, for equalizing. And white doesn't really have anything to do against it. And we can even go for bishop b5 later on, and in case of a5. I mean, we have very much an easier play, I would say, and white doesn't really have a way to push up easily to the center. So yeah, we're very much happy about it. And basically, yeah, this line, it's a funny idea, but for you to understand how new ideas appear in chess, basically you put up some, you try to outsmart your opponent, with knowing that they know what's the best way to play, yeah? So it's difficult. So with that, we have these setups with f3, bishop e3, queen d2, which are very prevalent. We will find them a lot also if we play the move order of the King's Indian, let's say this position, and or the King's Indian or the Benoni, or the Grunfeld as well. There are a lot of players that play with this move order, f3, straightforward. So we might have the chance to face them as well. So basically, we covered one of the first setups, and here after g3, white can also play bishop d3. The general idea is that white solves the problem of the development on the king side, but the bishop on d3 is a bit more exposed than on e2. I consider knight g2 a bit more precise than So, I mean, in the move 7, then bishop d3, and here after knight g2, castle, castle, a6. Again, we have the problem with developing this bishop, so we try to go for b5. Knight bd7, knight g3. In general, white wants to push for f4, bishop h3. So here playing knight d5 would be a bit too preemptive, I'd say. Here we go for rook b8. Trying to go for something like h5, which is the theme we have seen many, many times. Now we might face some trouble after bishop g5, queen c7, let's say. We want to play knight h7 and f4. Otherwise, it gets very tricky. Now, let's say if white wants to play f4, and also then e5, and after the e5, f5 is a theme that it's very much prevalent. White gives up the pawn, so we don't have... we don't enjoy the e5 square anymore, and also increases the pressure on the king side, and also gets the square for both knights. So this is what we don't want to happen. So after queen c7, here king h1 is a very smart move. I mean, this is not, let's say, much known, but this is a theme that can happen, that after knight h7, bishop h4 is a huge threat. Basically, white wants to play f4 and doesn't want to allow us to play h5. And if we try to play g5 here, white just simply wins after knight h5, ga4, queen g4, and the mate is not avoidable. So this is an attacking theme you need to know, so you don't play h5 automatically. So I want you to think a bit, yeah, not try to memorize. It's a defense that that relies a lot on you have this some plans, and you need to pick a card, yeah. And you need to think about it. I don't want you to memorize. So we play rook b8. We just want to play b5 at some point. And if white wants to go for f4, now we can play h5. Because there is no bishop g5, so h4 is not avoidable. And here, if white wants to play queen e2, let's say, to defend e4, and then knight shuffles back to here, here we could just give up the pawn. Now, for instance, play knight b6. This is a great example, I'd feel, of sacrificing. And now we threaten d5 after rook e8, and white would need to move the queen. Then we play c4, then we play bishop d7. We have a lot of counterplay, and the pawn on h4 is kind of annoying for white. So this would be an example of a position like, okay, queen e2 is a weird move, but this is how it should play. Like you'll see in the model game as well, as I told before, how these positions with achieving h4, you just need to open the position and suddenly white is kind of collapsing. So e5, as we talked briefly before, is a theme that we need to be aware of. And here will be, we need to counterplay quickly. So here h4, and after knight g4, c4, and we want to give up the pawn, and we will follow with b5. Let's say bishop c4, b5, and since we have this diagonal to create some pressure, something like knight b5, we would be winning back material already. And here we create some serious counterplay. Now b4 is coming. Now we would be able to exchange here, and yeah, loosen up the pressure for white. So white can also play h3, which is a smart prophylaxis, let's say, and still prevents h5, as bishop g5 is also a possibility. So here we need to find a move. So here knight e8. Yeah, again, we have two moves, basically, most of the time. So here knight e8, and we want to play knight c7 and b5. So f4 is the most played move here, but it's terribly bad, because after b5, take, knight b5, c4, very important move. And after take, we have the same thing, and we get two pieces for the rook, and basically we are winning strategically. Like white doesn't have enough, let's say, open files to justify having a rook, and cannot make use of them, cannot create any threat to the king or to the back rank or anything, yeah? So basically, if white tries to play bishop b5, now we have this trick that this bishop is loose, and after taking here, bishop d4 check is a great intermediate, and we basically won a piece. So here we have some peculiar threats, let's say, and think about it. If the bishop was on e2, this wouldn't be happening. Yeah? Like here, actually, bishop e2 is very smart, because now after b5 and knight b5, there won't be c4 threatening the bishop. So here, bishop f4. This is also the best move. Again, this is a way to showcase how it's very difficult for white to play these positions. Like who would play bishop e2, h3, bishop e2, and then bishop f4 when the plan is f4, and after queen e7, queen d2? The idea is that white allows us to play b5, but there is rook a7. Yeah. So, and here, yeah, this would be great even, I would say. Exchanging the knights at field, it's sensible, as rook a7 would threaten our knight on c7. So here after b4, and we would follow up with rook b7 to loosen the pressure on the knight and be able to move. I mean, it's still, for me, very hard to imagine how white creates any kind of pressure. The knight on g3 doesn't have any jumps. f4 is not even possible. Again, usually what we like about the Benoni is that white needs to mix up a lot of strategy and attack. And there is no middle ground for white. If white tries to do both at the same time or tries to go all in for one, we have a lot of chances to be better, I'd say. So here, it's not a position that I understand what white is good doing. Like, white needs to be playing like move by move, let's say. And you can only do that if you are the engine. Like, usually players play with a plan or with some ideas, with some approach, like, okay, I want to do this. But here is like, what's the best move all the time, which is not easy to perform. Yeah. So we covered also bishop d3, and finally we want to cover knight g2, which I feel is the best move, let's say, for white. And basically here we want to play h5. I want to suggest this line because now it's very specific, so it's easier to remember, and it makes sense now as white still did not develop this bishop. So let's compare it here. If bishop d3, bishop g2, knight g2, h5, I mean, doesn't prevent anything. Like, white doesn't need to play knight g3 to develop the pieces. So yeah, this here would be a bit like, okay, white would be like, okay, nice. I'll ignore you, or I'll play with bishop g5 and f4 and bishop h4, as we talked before. And we don't have anything with this h4 setup. So go back to knight g2, now h5. Bishop g5 is the only really logical move. The knight on f4 doesn't have the same flavor as white. At some point wants to play f4 or develop this bishop, so yeah, doesn't have the opportunity. Going for knight g1 could be somewhat interesting, but yeah, I feel this is a theme that happens a lot in the knight, or for some variations where black commits to h5 and white wants to claim that knight f6 now can play with knight f3. But I only see that this is a move order that white is one tempo down, and after knight, let's say after bishop g7, h3, castle, knight f3, I mean, white is let's say something like c4 and then b5, which is some of the themes we already know. And if white wants to play knight f3, we can just play, I don't know, a6, a4 as usual, and bishop g4. And this is not really a bad move, because at some point we want to play knight h7 as well, and to have this bishop very strong, as we've seen in the variation with knight f3, knight d2. Yeah. So yeah, it's not too terrible, I would say. And after h5, bishop g5, bishop g7, and here white has a couple of ways to play, as white still needs to solve this knight. So knight g3 is not possible, as we are not castled yet. So queen d2 is the most normal move, I'd say, in generic. And after castle, again, if knight g3, we still have h4. And here knight d4. Yeah, a very critical theme. Yeah, and basically after knight c1, a6, a4. Here we want to play knight bd7, as we want to play for b5. And again, white, when white commits to knight c1, we have no business with h4, so we shift to the queen side. So we did that as well in some other variations with knight c1. So, and after f3, queen c7, bishop e2, rook b8, and basically we look forward to play c4 and then b5, and the knight on c1 doesn't really make that much sense. We can also strive for some h4 ideas, knight h5, but whenever the bishop on g5 goes away, to play to bishop e3 to kind of secure these central dark squares. So yeah, we have a lot of dynamics in our favor. Let's say bishop e2, here b5 would be already good. And after taking queen b6, and here bishop b7, And we have some permanent pressure on b2, and again, the knight on c1 doesn't have any future, doesn't want to go here, nor here, nor here, and playing b3 would imply that this knight is still here for a while. And also, playing this queen b6 quickly before white play f3 means that we have some threats with c4 in case in the future, and yeah, this is an example of how we can usually play b5 and just be happy with it. Some of the lines, like you will see in the model game as well, that I played some b5 that wasn't precise, that white could punish, half punish. But even then I got a great position since white needs to keep playing very well according dynamically. So this variation with f3, again, or these setups with knight ge2, usually have some very difficult questions for white to how to develop here. After knight c1, which is the best move now. Like now white wants to solve everything, white did not commit to f3, so and we committed to h5. Castle bishop e2. So, and white did not spend a tempo playing queen d2. And here we have queen e8. I really like. It's a very creative move, and very specific move against a very specific move order. So I feel it makes sense to play something creative against creativity. It's easier to remember that if white plays this knight g2, knight c1 very quickly and the stuff, we have this queen e8. So it's easier to pair them together. Yeah. I don't know. You need to make sense of your repertoire as well. Don't try to. Yeah, I want to talk about it. Don't try to make a game of every preparation, because I found some students that they say, okay, against this variation, I always play knight e5. Okay, I always play this move. This is a very tricky way to remember, because for one game it's fine, yeah, but on the long run you cannot create different patterns for different positions and try to memorize this way. Try to make sense of why we play these moves. Yeah. Here it's a very concrete move, and basically white has we want to also play knight h7, and since we are threatening e4, we gain a tempo. So let's say f3, knight h7, bishop f4, queen e7, and basically white is left with very awkward knight. White doesn't have the usual pressure in bishop on g5. And here we want to play like something like knight d7, knight d5, and f5. You could leave it here, let's say. And we just check that after castle, knight d7, knight d3, white kind of prevents knight our plan. So now a6, a4, rook b8. Surprise! As usual, it's like, oh no, we cannot do our plan. So we go for the usual. And after knight f2, like white finally reroutes the knight, like look at this teasing pattern. Now we go for knight e5, and basically we want to play bishop d7, b5, and also we want to play like g5, f5. Like for instance here would be great g5, f5, and we have a lot of presence in the center. And basically we have all the pieces pointing to the center, and white would never be able to play f4 or to push, and we have a space for all our pieces. So, and our knight on e5 cannot be kicked, and then we have a strong bishop on g7, and we are the only ones having a breakthrough, which is something very important in chess, because sometimes we see the position statically, but okay, dynamically here, white doesn't have any kind of pawn break. So white is very reliable, because f4 doesn't really bring that much to the position. So yeah, this is f3 is the most reasonable way. Bishop f3 is not possible, as I guess we might be able to take on e4, and here play f5. And basically we win material already. White cannot take with the bishop, as bishop c3 is an option. And queen c2 might be the only logical way for white to play. Let's say white doesn't want to play with f3, that's why he's playing, or she's playing knight ge2. So basically, queen c2 might be logical. But now, knight a6. Now we have a move to explain, like to counter this specific, very specific move order for white. And now after castling, knight b4. And I really like knight b4 as it forces white to play some weird queen b1. And after bishop d7, we don't really mind that a3 is played, as we want to play b5. And a3 is not a move that, let's say, annoys us to give it for white, like white might need to play a4 anyway. But then the queen on b1 is obviously terrible. And we play queen knight b4 quickly. So white doesn't have the option to play queen d2 as this pawn is loose. Yeah. So okay, this is a very awkward line that basically it's very unlikely to face. But I feel in general these setups are for white with knight g2, bishop e3, queen d2, f3 have more or less the same ideas in common. To make a brief review of all of them, remember of this knight h3, knight f2. So we basically want to delay knight d7. Remember Dingley and Carlsen as well with this sick bishop c4 idea. And also remember these h4, knight d4 themes, or also bishop h6, knight d4 themes. Basically, they are very much important. And as well, when you don't know what to do, it's likely that a6, b5 is a solution, as you've seen countless of times already in this course. So yeah, it has always been a line that it's very fun to play with black. I'd say you need to remember the first couple moves, and then just with the ideas, every move kind of makes sense. So I would recommend you to not memorize specifically. Let's say the first time, okay, obviously you need to learn them. But the second time, try to understand, try to make sense. Don't try to say, okay, I know this is the move here, but why? Try to make a why. Yeah, please make some effort into memorizing. Otherwise, it's worthless, I would say. This is not, let's say, an exam for the public administration where you need to memorize all the stuff. Try to make sense of them, because this way, at some point, you won't need to memorize and you would be able to apply it to different positions. Yeah. So yeah, that would be my last advice. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this chapter and see you in another one.